Good morning. I'm Bill Laveley, Director of the University of Washington Taiwan Studies Program. On behalf of the university and the Jackson School of International Studies, it's my great honor to welcome you to the 4th World Congress of Taiwan Studies. The World Congress is a quadrennial meeting of the leading scholars in Taiwan Studies. Taiwan Studies is a young field, and like Taiwan itself, is still in the making. Over the next 3 days, we will hear over 70 papers, and we will have the opportunity to reflect on the state of the field and to set its course for the coming years. On the program are scholars from Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, Australia, the United Kingdom, France, Austria, the Czech Republic, Canada, and the US. Unfortunately, due to the COVID pandemic, most of our participants from Taiwan are unable to be here in person, so they will be presenting remotely. And this includes the Congress program organizers, Professor Michael Hsiao of Academia Sinica and Professor James Lin of the University of Washington, who will be joining us virtually from Taiwan. This Congress is the first to have a hybrid format, and it is also the first to be live streamed to social media. Thus, I'd like to welcome our global audience viewing the proceedings on YouTube and Facebook. It remains to wish each of you a very productive meeting, and to those of you in the room, a very enjoyable visit to Seattle. And now I turn the floor over to our next speaker, Professor Michael Hsiao of Academia Sinica.
Thank you, Bill, for your warm opening remarks. President Cauce, Director General Chen, Director Chou, Professor Katz, distinguished participants on site and online. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning in Seattle, and this is midnight in Taiwan. And welcome to the 4th World Congress of Taiwan Studies. I also wish to welcome you all on behalf of President Liao and Vice President Wang of Academia Sinica, Taiwan, one of the co-organizers of this year's World Congress. Due to the pandemic quarantine regulation in Taiwan, I cannot make my trip to join you in person, and I apologize for that. The 2022 4th World Congress continue a tradition that has featured successful events held previously in Taipei, organized by Academia Sinica in 2012, in London, co-organized by Cauce in 2015, and in Taipei again, sponsored by Academia Sinica in 2018. The host of this year's Congress, the Taiwan Study Programs at the University of Washington, under the most able leadership of Professor Bill Laveley and James Lin, promise to bring you all another exciting platform for Taiwan studies scholars to meet and interact in a productive and meaningful way. I would like to take this occasion to send my sincere personal appreciation to both James and Bill and their wonderful and capable local organizing team, Jennifer Joy and Ian Oates, for their gracious and tireless work in bringing this World Congress of Taiwan Studies bringing this World Congress in fruition. The members of the Secretariat of World Congress of Taiwan Study, based in Institute of Sociology, Academia Sinica, including Professor Chen, and Evelyn Wang, and myself, owe you a great deal for the great job done thus far. In addition, as the Secretary General of the Fourth World Congress, I also wish to recognize the important contributions from Taiwan's Ministry of Education, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and CCK Foundation for jointly making this Congress a reality. In 2022, we come together amid the continuing difficulties and disruptions brought about by the global pandemic, which has greatly affected all aspects of our lives, including academic exchange activities. In spite of these challenges, this year's Congress is still well supported by many scholars. As many as 180 submissions to our call for papers were received, and it is also well attended with 88 participants by both on-site 55 and online 33 from 10 countries around the world. The Congress theme, Taiwan in the Making, says well of what we intend to accomplish by sharing our intellectual ideas and visions together for the 3 days of the World Congress. The Congress program has been well planned, featuring a great diversity of topics, including fruitful presentations from scholars of different disciplines in social sciences and humanities. I'm very confident that the 2 plenary sessions, 3 roundtables, and 74 paper presentations of this Congress will exemplify the many aspects, ways in which Taiwan study has been continuing to thrive in spite of the disruptions. At the end of my welcome message this morning, I'm happy to inform you that the 5th World Congress of Taiwan Study will be held back to Taipei to be hosted by Academia Sinica in 2025. I hope we can see each other again in person at the 2025 World Congress then. Finally, I hope you all have an exciting and enjoyable time in this year's World Congress of Taiwan Studies in the coming 3 days. Best wishes to you all, and stay healthy and well, which is the most important thing in today's world. Thank you very much.
Next, we will have a greeting from University of Washington President Anna Marie Cauce.
Welcome to the University of Washington. Whether you're participating in person or online, we're so happy to be hosting you for the 4th World Congress of Taiwan Studies. And congratulations to the Taiwan Studies Program for hosting this great event, the first program in North America to do so. We're proud to be home to one of North America's few Taiwan Studies programs, and this program is not only dedicated to the study of Taiwan, but it also fosters a community of scholars, students, alumni, and members of the public. The World Congress of Taiwan Studies represents an important milestone for our program. And thank you to all the institutions supporting the program in this meeting. I especially want to thank the Taiwan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Taiwan Ministry of Education, the Zhang Jingguo Foundation, and the Seattle office of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office. Finally, I offer special thanks to all our local community of supporters and donors whose support has made this program possible. Your engagement and enthusiasm sustain our activities, and I wish you all a wonderful Congress.
And next, I'd like to welcome the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office Director General Daniel K.C. Jun to the podium.
Professor Lively and Professor Hsiao online, and Professor Katz and Director Sophie, and friends online, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So it's such an honor to join you here for the fourth World Congress of Taiwan Studies. Because of COVID, I know many people cannot join us, but we just heard about Professor Hsiao speaking online, whereas his son, Russell Hsiao, joined us here and served as a kind of a pre-example of the hybrid presentation, hybrid meeting. So you have people online and also people in person, but still, thank you very much for being here. So first of all, on behalf of the Taiwan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to express congratulations to University of Washington Taiwan Studies on hosting this fourth World Congress. For the first time, this event ever held in the States. I know Bill, James, and members of Academia Sinica and the University of Washington Taiwan Study have worked very, very hard to prepare this event. And this will surely provide a springboard for eminent scholars to share their insights on the current issues of Taiwan studies. So 40 years ago, Taiwan study was a marginalized part of a study regarding China. But because of your efforts, so it gradually became an independent, interdisciplinary field of study that plays a very important role as other Asian programs, focusing on Singapore, Korea, Japan, and even China. So a distinct Taiwan study program is very important, as it creates a rapidly growing Taiwanese identity for its citizens that is separate from and apart from the other Asian countries. It doesn't matter they are Haqqanis, they are Mainlanders or new immigrants from Southeast Asia. So now more than 80% of people in Taiwan view themselves as a Taiwanese, whereas only 5% people think they are Chinese. So on the other hand, the rise of Taiwan study also positively contributes to the nation's soft power projections and helps share global discourse about Taiwan, Taiwan's vibrant democracy, gender equality, environmental actions, and high-tech manufacturing, and its strategic position as a successful democracy in the Indo-Pacific regions, all makes Taiwan study an important field of scholars to explore. So I look forward to have a lively discussion on how Taiwan can take even greater strides forward and to increase its contribution on the global stage for the shared prosperity of mankind. So once again, on behalf of Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Taiwan, I would like to wish the World Congress of Taiwan Study a resounding success and look forward to a thriving future for the UW Taiwan Study Program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next, I'd like to welcome Sophie Chou, who is Director of the Education Division of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in San Francisco.
Professor Lovely, Director General Chen, and Professor Dr. Cauce, distinguished guests, and all good friends of Taiwan Study. Good morning. I am Sophie Chou, the Director of Education Division, Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in San Francisco. I still remember when I joined the Ministry of Education 30 years ago, there was only very few scholars doing Taiwan studies. And after decades promotion, the Ministry of Education has already have 42 leading universities from 19 countries globally set up Taiwan study programs. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Academia Sinica and the University of Washington because of you organized such a wonderful platform, the Congress of this Taiwan Study, World Congress of Taiwan Study. So all the scholars and good friends of Taiwan Study can get together and join and share the research achievements. So thank you for your efforts. And of course, I will take this opportunity to thank all the participants because of your support and your commitment. So we can have the Taiwan Study Program being valued better and much more important in the academic research area. Thank you so much for your participation, and I like you enjoy the Congress, and I would wish better development in the future for Taiwan Studies Program. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Professor Paul Katz of the Jiang Jingguo Foundation.
Good evening. Okay. All right. I shall be brief. No. But I think I'm very happy to be here. I think it's totally appropriate that the Jiang Jingguo Foundation be supporting Taiwan studies. When I first went to Taiwan in 1983, when most of you were born, Jiang Jingguo was still president, and then at the time, you still could not really get in contact with much Taiwanese. All our textbooks were about Fan Gong Fu Guo, and the only mention of Taiwan was like Ali Shan Guliang and Wu Feng. But during the last years of his reign, Jiang Jingguo ushered in Taiwan's transition to democracy and indigenization, the sort of Bantu Hua Yindong. And so what we are seeing today is the results of what happened under the presidency of Jiang Jingguo. Now, the Jiang Jingguo Foundation has been very active in supporting Taiwan studies, including this World Congress, other World Congresses, NATSA, EATS, we've had a long-term relationship with, and also the University of Washington Taiwan Studies Program, and we had a visit from them before, and this is a very, very promising program that we look forward to supporting in the future. We also have a very long-term relationship with the University of Washington. I went through our database. We've supported about $2.5 million worth of grants to University of Washington and University of Washington Press. And back in 2019, the president you just saw, Professor, was it Cauce? Cauce came for a visit, and she brought us a lovely gift. So I think this is for us, the foundation, this is a very special meeting for two reasons. One, because it shows the true fruition of Taiwan studies now. So many brilliant scholars have come together despite such trying circumstances. And it also shows the importance of the University of Washington, which we know it will continue to play in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we go to the next part of our program, which is the keynote address by Professor Michael Hsiao. And to introduce Professor Hsiao, we have Professor James Lin of the University of Washington.
My name is James Lin, and I'm an assistant professor at the Jackson School at the University of Washington. I'm honored to introduce the keynote speaker for the 4th World Congress of Taiwan Studies, Professor Xinhuang Michael Hsiao. Professor Hsiao is Adjunct Research Fellow at the Institute of Sociology at Academia Sinica, Chair Professor of Hakka Studies at National Central University, and Honorary Chair Professor of Southeast Asian Studies at National Jinan University. He's also the chairman of a number of prominent foundations and committees, including the Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation, the Executive Committee of the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at National Central University, the Consortium of Southeast Asian Studies in Asia, and the Consortium of Global Hakka Studies. Since 2016, he's also served as the Senior Advisor to the President of Taiwan. His research areas of specialty include middle class, civil society, and democratization in Asia, environmental movements, sustainability and risk society, and comparative Hakka studies in Taiwan and Southeast Asia. He has published prolifically throughout his career, and I only have time to mention just a few from the past couple of years, such as The Ethnic Relations of Hakka Belts in Taiwan and Malaysia, 2020 China Impact, Attitude Changes in Taiwan and Hong Kong, The Volatility and Future of Democracies in Asia, Environmental Movements and Politics of the Asian Anthropocene, Taiwan Studies Revisited, Middle Class Civil Society and Democracy in Asia, and of course, the forthcoming Encyclopedia of Taiwan Studies, which was the subject of one of the roundtables at the World Congress. Professor Hsiao has been a pioneer and a key figure in the history and in the present of Taiwan studies, not just through his publications and research, but also through his tireless effort to carve out a space for studying Taiwan in the academy and in the public sphere. He started the World Congress of Taiwan Studies a decade ago to bring together the global communities of Taiwan studies across Europe, Japan, Taiwan, and North America. It has been a real pleasure to work with a scholar as generous and selfless with his time and energy as Professor Hsiao. Today, we recognize his decades of contribution and work in Taiwan studies by inviting him to give this keynote speech reflecting on Taiwan studies theory. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Michael Hsiao.
Thank you very much for your kind words, James. Good morning, everyone. It is indeed my pleasure to deliver the 4th World Congress Taiwan Studies keynote speech this morning. For the past 40 years, I have constantly reminded myself to keep the three identities at the same time during my career as a sociologist in Taiwan. As a Taiwanese sociologist, my task is to apply relevant Western social science theories to theorize Taiwan studies. That has been my work during 1980 to year 2000. As an Asian sociologist, my task is to keep a very perspective of a competitive sensitivities, so that the Taiwan study is not put in the isolation, but in a Asian context perspective. As a world sociologist, my challenge is to move further to how to propose a theory or theorizing or theoretical framework based on Taiwan study, so that as to construct a Taiwan-based theory so that we can provide to the world sociologists. Now, since the time limit, I prepare a PowerPoint. So let's look at the PowerPoint. Now, I have done already my 4 decades of Taiwan study experience. Now, this morning, I would like to do is to first provide what I have been found, the so-called Taiwanese characteristics from the various fields I have done, namely social movement, middle class, civil society, democratization, and Hakka study. And so that by presenting the so-called Taiwan characteristic from the findings, I can further tackle the dual issues of what social sciences have contributed to Taiwan studies, and how Taiwan study can give back to social sciences by way of modifying, challenging, or reconstructing the Western social theories. Later, I would like further to challenge myself to present to you what I call the Taiwan-based theorizing, by using my research findings in Taiwan on social movement, middle class, civil society, and democratization to construct what I called quadripartite theorizing. The quadripartite links of a middle class, civil society, democratic opposition party, and democracy in Taiwan and competitive Asia. To tell the truth, that this morning I'm going through a epistemic journey. So I hope I can share with you what my journey will be. Okay, I have been working on Taiwan social movement since 1980s, the day when I returned to Taiwan. I have found the following very important findings. First, the Taiwan social movement was the organized movement began as early as 1980s, at that time still under the KMT authoritarian rule. It started with a social reform as the movement, the objectives, the politicized strategies was adopted in the decades of 1980s. It then turned into politicized in movement issue making, and even developed an alliance with the emerging political opposition party, DPP, in the 1990s. So you can see the shift of the strategy and objectives. For more than 2 decades, the implicit and explicit objective of the overall social movement have always been to push for authoritarian transformation and to facilitate democratization. At the democratic transformation, proactive social movement organizations and the former authoritarian regime and the new opposition, the new opposition party KMT still could not, however, establish any coalition or cooperation in pushing reform agenda in the post-authoritarian era. Social movement dynamics was created by the organized advocacy force of Taiwanese civil society or organizations, which I will get into that later. So what are the Taiwanese characteristics? First, Taiwan experience offers a special case with a history of 40 years long where social movement organizations could have shifted its strategies, changed the course of a momentum, and steered or altered its relations with different types of a political regime as democratization progressed. Also, Taiwan case modifies the epistemic assumption of the existing social movement theories not to deal with directly the nature of the state regime. For example, it really assumes all the states are democratic. And under the democratic state, the social movement theory has been developed. But from the Taiwan's case, tell us vividly that the nature of the state really matters. Now, let's move on my research on middle class. First, my research on middle class in Taiwan did find that it was the first generation when it emerged in the 1980s. It was the social structural product and the beneficiary of the authoritarian developmental state-led industrialization and economic growth. Most of them were upward mobile new class elements from the family backgrounds of farmers and workers. Its class features are multifaceted, economically consumption-seeking, socially network-searching, politically ambivalent, swing and liberal inclined, and culturally feminism-oriented and emulating capitalists' upper-class lifestyle. It was also internally diverse, though, with the distinguishable old middle class, new middle class, and marginal middle class element as its subclass compositions. Over the 4 decades or so, the coexistence of the first and the second generation, or even the third generation middle class can be finally observed until today. It is important to point out that the liberal inclined segment within the new middle class has been both the organizers and supporters of the previously mentioned social and political movement organizations. So what is Taiwan characteristics? The Taiwan characteristics can be stated as the following. Taiwan experience witnessing the birth of the first generation middle class offer a unique case to challenge the current middle class theories based on the Western historical course where middle class has already developed for more than a century or so, or more than 1.5 centuries. It even led to an overgeneralized theorizing of the decline, collapse, dismissal of the middle class at the world scale. And unfortunately, many studies on the middle class in the non-Western world apply such a Western theorizing of the decline, dismissal to apply their own countries, where most of the Asian countries, for example, only have a first or second generation middle classes. So I think this is a very important findings that can challenge the epistemic assumption. My third one is research on civil society. Taiwan's civil society was effectively manifested in the forms of various emerging autonomously organized non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and non-profit organizations, NPOs, in the 1980s. And before, under the authoritarian rule, no organized people's organization or non-governmental, non-profit organization can be established. So it was before 1980s, there was a non-existence of the so-called civil society organizations. From a Taiwan experience, I prefer to call it civil society organizations, CSO, rather than simply civil society, as they were all physically established by inspiring liberal middle-class intellectuals and professionals, with or without legal approval from the state, especially under the authoritarian rule. Two types of CSOs have been clearly observed. First, advocacy, protest civil society organizations, and second, philanthropic or service CSO, with a very different nature of a social and political propensity and agenda in their mind. Both types of CSO have been largely middle-class originated, associated, and supported. The advocacy CSOs have been the backbone of the above-mentioned social and political movement organization since 1980s, and continue to function as the engine of a momentum behind the Taiwan's democratization course since then. Taiwan story. Now I share with you the Taiwan characteristics. Taiwan story offers a good point of departure to modify, to challenge the overgeneralized civil society discourse, especially in the analysis discourse over the proper role of a civil society to democracy-making path. That, like the Western theories of a social movement, the assumption, epistemic assumption, was democracy was there already. But in Taiwan's case, when we study social movement, when we civil society organization, the goal was to establish a democracy rather than to observe the democracy already there. If you look at the popular third sector theories in today's civil society world, the third sector, the first sector, second sector, and third sector theory was predominantly under the assumption that the democracy has been there. Therefore, we can observe the three sectors dynamics. But in Taiwan's case, before 1980s, there was only one sector, the state, the authoritarian state, or even two sectors, the Taiwan authoritarian state and the state enterprises. There are even no lively, viable private sectors. Okay, let's look at my research on democratization. The demands for political change and reforms began as early as late 1950 and 1960, initiated from the KMT's internal non-mainstream liberal faction, and is ended, unfortunately, in the failed attempts to form an opposition party. At the end 1960s and all the way to 1970s, the liberalization move was pushed by a variety of the political opposition magazines published by liberal and progressive middle-class intellectuals and political activists. From the 1980s and onwards, the democratic path, characterized by a series of actions and demands by organized social reform movements, organizations, political activists, and opposition party. So we can see the three phases of Taiwan democratization. The decade of 1980s can be characterized as the era of a political liberalization, not democratization yet. The decade of 1990s, we can characterize it as a political democratic transformation, where we can see the shift of the authoritarian rule to the liberalized, the soft authoritarian rule. And then in the year 2000, then we witnessed the fruit of Taiwan democratization, the first democratic regime change in year 2000, and later, year 2008, and the third regime change took place in year of 2016. During the previous 4 decades of liberalization and democratization efforts, the driving force all came from the mobilized advocacy CSOs with the liberal and progressive middle classes intellectuals, professionals, and political activists behind them, and the middle class-led political opposition party on the side. As a sociologist, and I observe, most of us have ignored the political party and consider that is the domain, that's the field where the political scientists should deal with. But I found from Taiwan's case, the establishment of the opposition party in 1986 without the legal protection was very crucial for Taiwan's democratization, especially if you look at how the dynamic relations between the CSO, the liberal middle classes, and the opposition party. It was also, I found, it was indeed Taiwan's case, it was a bottom-up political process that has been pushing for democratic transformation. The authoritarian party state was finally forced to make reluctant conciliations to turn to liberal and the democratic reform. At the beginning of the democratic movement, the existing ethnic conflict played an important role in combining or transcending the outcry of ethnic justice and the political democracy. Therefore, the ethnic conflict or ethnic injustice was the base of the Taiwan's drive on the civil society to push for Taiwan democratization. But in the later stage of democratic transformation, the emerging cross-strait conflict has emerged to be the central focus where Taiwanese identity as well as nationalism has been becoming a determining factor in leading the Taiwanese democratic struggle. So we can see the internal factor and the external factor. There was the early part, and the external factor play a very important role at the later part. Now, what are the characteristics? The Taiwan case of democracy offers a holistic history of a third-way democracy over the past 40 years. How it began, who were the key players, how it transformed, what internal and external factors have affected the different courses of democratic development. Especially, it provides a vivid case on how the external hostile China threat could have, in fact, affected and interferes Taiwan's democratic development nowadays, and how Taiwan has to constantly cope with such external threats from China. I think that is only the insider and also the sharp with a competitive perspective can provide such a view to look at clearly the change of an internal factor of the ethnic conflict to the cross-strait conflict. in Taiwan's democratization experience. Now let's move my fifth field of Hakka studies. My journey of research Hakka ethnic groups began in the 1990s. By the way, I'm a Hakka, so I think this is a very personal factor. Why I get into Hakka study, I think not because I was an expert in ethnic study. I was not. But I think it's because of motivation as being a Hakka, and I was asked by by my colleagues who are Hakka, and they said, you are sociology, you should really embark on the Hakka studies. And then that's what I did. So I studied my Hakka study in Taiwan in 1990s. And I co-authored a book on Taiwan's Hakka political history. And into year 2000, with a grant from the Council of Hakka Affairs, I began my journey of Hakka studies in Southeast Asia. And with the hope, again, to compare the Hakka experience in Taiwan and in Southeast Asia. At the first research, I discovered actually the Hakka distribution in Taiwan had concentrated in 5 Hakka zones or Hakka belt. And I also studied their local political dynamics, the local faction, and how the Minnan and Hakka ethnic relations, and also how the Hakka experience was affected by the ongoing ethnic policies, first in the KMT's regime and later under the DPP regime. I also found very importantly that the Hakka ethnic movement in 1988 was very crucial to change the Hakka experience in Taiwan, because it changed the Hakka's experience and also it upgrade the Hakka ethnic identity and the Hakka ethnic status. Now, what did I find? What I found in Southeast Asian Hakka experience, I began to look at the Hakka ethnic associations and their organizations. And because that was the very root of the Hakka experience, the Hakka ethnic association called Huiguan was very crucial for the development. And most of Hakka are labor, or kind of a contract labor from southern China to Southeast Asia. And I also look into Hakka identity in Malaysia and Indonesia, and Hakka ethnic relations in Malaysia's Hakka belt and zones. I want to emphasize here, the Hakka studies in Taiwan and Southeast Asia and the comparative Hakka study was made possible because I organized a research team in different time. And so this was indeed the comparative research was a teamwork. So I have kept in mind that I have to do a comparative study, because if you want to understand Hakka experience in Taiwan, you have to look at what happened to the Hakka in Southeast Asia. And by looking at what happened in Southeast Asia, by contrasting with the Taiwan experience, so I can understand Hakka experience much more clearly and sharply. The comparative Hakka study offers a rich opportunity to highlight the Taiwanese Hakka unique and advantageous ethnic status among the world Hakka diaspora, about 65 million in the world, in more than 80 countries. It is also the above-mentioned Hakka ethnic movement that changed the state ethnic policy and therefore upgraded Taiwan's Hakka ethnic identity and ethnic status. Taiwan Hakka experiences represent its drastic difference, both from their fellow Hakka in ancestral hometowns in China as well as many of their counterparts in all other foreign countries. To me, the Taiwan's experience of the Taiwan Hakka experience itself is a model of its own. So also from this one, I can find from studying the Southeast Asian Hakka, I also disclosed the invisibility nature of the Hakka ethnic identity under the shadow of the umbrella ethnic Chinese identity in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. It further illustrates the potential contributions of Hakka ethnic identity and the Hakka ethnic studies to the Chinese overseas studies, which I found usually ignore the existence and the importance of sub-ethnic groups such as Hakka. If you look at all the overseas Chinese studies, books, research, when we look at the so-called overseas Chinese or Chinese overseas, usually very little mentioned about the Hakka. Okay, so this is my 5 research field which I have done in the past 40 years, and I have called your attention of the various Taiwanese characteristics, and I also, by doing so, modify and challenges the existing Western social theories by providing you the Taiwan case. Now, in the following few minutes, I would like to challenge myself to further some of my research by proposing what I call the Taiwan-based theories. Taiwan experience over the past 40 years, to a great extent, has confirmed as well as challenged the previous 2 related democracy theories generated in the West. Confirmations. First, middle class has been the positive force to democratization and democratic consolidation, and which has been advocated by Lipset and others in 1960s. The second, the civil society has been the positive force to democratization and democratic consolidation. For example, in the 1980s and 1990s, and based on the Eastern European experience advocated by scholars like John King and Putman, and so on and so forth. Challenges, though. First, the first challenge from a Taiwan experience required, actually, from a Taiwan experience and the Asian competitive perspective, it requires a specific kind of a liberal and progressive segment of the new middle class, who should have dared to openly and collectively demand for democratization. In other words, the 1960s only talk about middle class. So that's not too simplified. The existence of a large number of middle class individuals is not enough. The second challenge, it needed the specific type of advocacy and pro-democracy civil society organizations that should have physically and collectively facilitated and pushed a series of necessary social and political reforms leading to democracy building. The general theory of a civil society didn't talk about what kind of civil society organizations. So therefore, the Western theories to generalize the civil society and democracy is to simplify as well. The emergence of a large number of various civil society organizations is not sufficient. The third challenge, the above specified liberal and progressive new middle class would also have actually organized, participated, or supported the above specific advocacy and pro-democracy civil society organization for staging various collective actions to realize different phases democratization, such as social reform, political liberalization, democratic transition, democratic consolidation, and even democratic safeguard or rescue. In Taiwan's case, after you have a democracy, doesn't mean you can have the democracy forever. In Taiwan's case, actually, we have efforts by the advocacy civil society to rescue the democracy. The first challenge, the above specified liberal and progressive middle class centered advocacy and pro-democracy civil society organization could also then forge vital strategic coalition with the Democratic Opposition Party, DPP, at the various critical junctures of democracy making and democracy rescuing. Based on the above empirical and theoretical elaborations, drawing from the Taiwan experience with various Taiwanese characteristics, a diagram of the quadripartite links of a middle class, civil society, political party, and democracy can therefore be formulated as below. This is what I call Taiwan-based theorizing. First, you need a specific liberal and progressive middle class who could collectively participate in support the specified advocacy civil society organization and social movement organizations. And then the specified advocacy pro-democracy civil society organization with the support of the progressive middle class can openly develop alliance or coalition with the Democratic Opposition Party where it existed. And then through the political opposition party, and behind them the organized, and then can push for the organized pressure and electoral politics, and then can make possible for the politics of a democratization, democratic transition. For example, under the authoritarian rule, can push for liberalization, and once the democratic transition is there, then we could push for the institutionalized democratization and democratic institutionalization, and then democratic consolidation. So I think this diagram is very much what I call the Taiwan theorizing. It is suggested that the Taiwan theoretical diagram of the quadripartite links may serve as the conceptual and analytical basis for the comparative perspective or comparative research on political contention under authoritarianism, democratic transition, and transformation in many of the partly free as well as non-free countries in the world for their ongoing democratic struggles. A comparative study of the middle-class civil society and democracy in Asia with participation of scholars from South Asia, South Korea, Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and Taiwan was conducted under my lead directorship in order to examine the feasibility and various of the above Taiwan generated theorizing. It is just an example of how Taiwan study may be able to give back to social science in tackling the various contemporary pressing research issues. Now, conclusion remark is very simple. I have present to you the trilogy. The first part is establishing Taiwan's unique experience and where I make use of the indigenized social sciences to theorize Taiwan. And the second part is to modify and challenge the related social theories where I found the Western social right lack of the analytical power or ability. The third is more challenging, is to globalize social science by way of a possible Taiwan theories making. At the end of my talk, I wanted to to tell you, I will continue my epistemic journey to keep questioning the epistemic limitation of the Western theories and searching what and how Taiwan study can give back to the existing social science theories. And from my personal experience, I can assure you, by being a scholar on Taiwan study for many years, I found it gave me a lot of joy and a lot of pressure, and of course a lot of challenges to make me a good Taiwanese sociologist, a good Asian sociologist, and hopefully I can be a qualified world sociologist as well. So thank you very much for your attention.